Good morning, Meeting House. It is so great to see you. We're excited to have you here today with us, whether you're here in the room or whether you're watching. But we're going to invite you to stand right where you are. Let's join in together as we lift up our voices. Together.
You are the shepherd king, the sovereign of everything. Your mercy and majesty, no mind can conceive it. How quickly I forget, you've never failed me yet. How endless the reason for my heart to believe it. You are holy King of heaven and earth. You are Lord of all unspeakable word. You are everything you say you are. Oh, oh what a mystery that you came and rescued me. The cross is my victory. I stand here forgiven. How quickly I forget. And great is your faithfulness. How endless the reasons for my heart now to sing it. You are holy King in heaven and earth. You are Lord of all unspeakable word. You are everything you say you are. You are defender of the broken and weak. You are faithful like a father should be. You are everything you say you are. Oh, you are. Yes, you are. Everything you say you are. You are. You spoke the earth in motion. You gave the breath of life. You cursed the snake in Eden and promised a sacrifice. You rescued out of Egypt. You split the oceans wide. You shut the mouths of lions and stood with us in the fire. 400 years of silence, born of a virgin came. Jesus, the one Messiah, the name above every name. Raised up in crucifixion, laid down in Joseph's grave. You rose in resurrection, Emmanuel, God who saves. You are holy King of heaven and earth. You are Lord of all unspeakable word. You are everything you say you are. You are defender of the broken and weak. You are faithful like a father should be. You are everything you say you are. You are, you are, you are, you are everything you say you are.
Carried our shame, this Jesus
who rose from the grave, the same Jesus. We worship today, we worship today. He came to us in grace and in truth. He's still with us and still on the move, the same Jesus. He's making us new, he's making us new. I know that my Redeemer lives. I know that my Redeemer lives. Still keeping all his promises. The same Jesus, the same Jesus. All together. He's commanding the wind and the waves. His kingdom forever shall reign, and we know that he's coming again. He is coming again. I know that my Redeemer lives. I know that my Redeemer lives. He's still keeping all his promises. The same Jesus, the same Jesus. I know that my Redeemer lives. I know that my Redeemer lives. He's still keeping all his promises. The same Jesus, the same Jesus. All right, here we go. Oh, he's the first and the last, the beginning and end. At the sound of his cry, all the world came alive, and he formed us from dust, put his breath in our lungs. We were made for his love, but we ran from the light. But he wouldn't give up on his daughters and sons, so he took up the cross and he laid down his life, and he did what he said when he rose from the dead, and he's coming back again. I know that my Redeemer lives. Come on. I know that my Redeemer lives. Still keeping all his promises. The same Jesus, the same Jesus. I know that my Redeemer lives. I know that my Redeemer lives. He's still keeping all his promises. The same Jesus, the same Jesus. Woo. So this Jesus we just sang about, I want you to think back over your week. Just say, God, whatever it was that was uncomfortable, I'm just gonna open my hands and give it to you. That's all what this song's about. So may we enter into that with a heart of openness.
Jesus, I am willing, even if it's not the way I planned. I want what you want. I lay down my opinions and offer every part of me again. I want what you want. I want what you want. the day. You're the name above all names. And when it all falls away, you're still standing. And at the end of the day, you're the name above all names. And when it all falls away, you're still standing. You're still standing. You're still speaking. You're still working. You're still moving. You're still standing. You're still speaking. You're still working. You're still moving. You're still standing. You're still speaking. You're still working. You're still moving. You're still standing. I know you're still speaking. You're still working. You're still You're still moving. You're still moving. You're still moving. I don't need all the answers. I've never been more sure you're in control. You're in it all. Lord of it all, and I will stay surrendered, even when it feels uncomfortable. You're in it all, Lord of it all.
So just encourage you where you are. I don't know what your week was like. I don't know what you experienced, but think of a time this past week where there's something that was uncomfortable. Something that didn't maybe go the way you expected, or maybe an interaction that didn't happen the way that you thought. Whatever that is, whatever happens, I just encourage you to say, God, I don't understand all of it. I fully can't even know what all is going to happen. But with open hands, God, I give it to you. Because I believe you are the Lord of it all. And as we think about it as a church and we follow after Jesus, just encourage you to step into that and not step back. Because when you step into it, that's when Jesus can show that he's trustworthy and he's faithful and he is worthy of all of our praise because he is Lord of it all. Do you agree, church? Yes. Because he's Lord of it all, yes. We haven't practiced this, but I think we need to sing that chorus again, just one last time, just to end our time together and say, God, we're gonna give whatever's uncomfortable to you because that's where you do your amazing work. That's where you come and you visit with us and you do your amazing work. We're out of time. So we'll save that for another. I'll let you sing that on your way home today, all right? You can sing that as you drive away from church, okay? You may be seated.
Good morning, church. My name is Caleb Miller. I'm on the First Impressions team here at TMH, and I just want to say good morning and welcome, and thanks for being here today. We have a prayer line, and what I was thinking about, while I worshiped and while we worshiped, just kind of the things that pop into my head as different lyrics pop up that kind of remind me of something going on in my life. And then Scott he put those uncomfortable things in your mind that are in your hands that you should just let go of. I encourage you to text those to the prayer line if that's something that might be helpful for you. There is a team that prays actively for any request that comes through. I encourage you to, whatever you thought of this morning, today, that's, that you have in your hands that you just want to let go of and open up and give to God, I encourage you to just send a text, whatever the situation is, a praise, or a need of any kind. Just send that text just as a way that we can support you and that you can know that we are praying for you and whatever that might be. Also, I said I'm on the First Impressions team. That's because we like to try to make a good first impression to visitors because we really believe in the mission and what's happening here at church. And so if you are new, we do want to make a good first impression. And so if you go outside after the service, and I'll be over there in my shirt, and there's a team of us, feel free to come up, and we'd love to chat with you, give you a gift and a way of saying thank you, answer any questions you might have about what we're all about, or why I want to say hi to you and get to know you, anything like that. We would love to answer those questions. I would love to answer that question. So we'd love to see you outside those doors. Right as you walk out, you'll see me standing there. I'm pretty tall, so you can't miss me. So next Sunday is Palm Sunday, and after the second service, at this location, we're going to have a little gathering, but Dillsburg's also having the same gathering, just at their location. We're going to have a picnic and an egg hunt. So all are welcome. We encourage you to come. There's going to be food provided. There is a registration for that on the website. I think it's tmh.church/egg hunt. I could be wrong. But register for that. Even if you're thinking about going, you're not sure, just go fill it out so we can have a rough estimate of what the numbers might be. We'd love to see you there. And there is an egg hunt after the picnic is over for kids 5th grade and under. And if you do see like roughly 6'3", 5th grader with a beard, that is a 5th grader, I promise, but he just loves to participate in egg hunts. So just don't think twice about it if you see someone looks roughly like me participating in the egg hunt. They are in 5th grade, I promise you. So that's Palm Sunday. Then Easter Sunday is the week after, which is a really fun Sunday where we can share the Easter message, which is, one of the most important Sundays of the year for the church. And then the week after that, we're having baptisms. And so if you are thinking about getting baptized, or if that's just something that might speak to you in the next couple of weeks, there are opportunities to get baptized that Sunday. If that's been a season of your life where you're maybe looking to take that next step in your faith. I know I was baptized, and my wife was baptized here. I was baptized in a place that's important to me. And the important thing was that we were surrounded by family. And we as a church family want to celebrate you and support you if that's a decision you want to make. And so I encourage you to go to tmh.church/baptism for more information about that. And if you want to give, you can give at the ways that are listed up there. I don't have time to pray for the offering, but we're gonna look at what's next in our series, The Good Life.
Hey, good morning, everyone. It is great to be with you here in Carlisle. My name is Dave Downey. I'm the campus pastor at the Dillsburg venue at TMH, and it's good to be back here in Carlisle this morning, and I'm excited to bring the message this morning. We're in this series that we've been calling The Good Life, and this morning we're going to be considering the difference between a change mindset versus a transformation mindset and how that relates to this conversation that we've been having. A part of my story that a lot of people maybe don't know is that back in high school, I lost a lot of weight in a short amount of time. I was struggling with my weight at the time. I was kind of the chubby kid at school, and in high school, my junior year, I went on this workout binge, and I lost about 60 pounds in less than a year. I also grew 6 inches at the time. And so there was this radical physical transformation that was happening in my life. And I think it would have been easy at the time for people to look at that change, that sort of impressive change that also is very visible and is something that is often really celebrated in our culture, and look at that change and assume that there was overall health and flourishing that was taking place in my life at that time. But as I look back, I realize now that just because there was that impressive change that was happening in one area, it didn't mean that that was the case. In fact, under the surface of all of that change that was going on, I would say I was actually regressing in my maturity because I became obsessed with the way that I was being perceived from others. You see, I was driven into this weight loss because of feeling like I was always sort of on the margins, not getting the attention that I wanted socially, both in my youth group and at my big public high school. And so underneath, it was driven by this insecurity and this appetite to be noticed and affirmed in the world. And so while, yes, there was all of this change happening, underneath that, deeper insecurity, there was a workout addiction. There was just this constant feeling like every time I stepped into a room, what was on my mind was myself, how I looked, how I was perceived by other people. And that kind of dynamic that was going on within me has taken years to heal and recover from. But I think what happens is, again, we look at a change that's happening that's visible, especially if it's in an area that's celebrated in our culture, and we assume that there's overall health and flourishing taking place. But we know that that's not the case. Even spiritually, there are different versions of this same thing, where we look at a change that's happening in a Christian leader or a Christian institution, and especially if that change is visible and something that's celebrated in our culture, we assume that there's deep transformation in Jesus taking place there, that the whole thing is healthy. For example, if the church gets bigger, if the platform of a leader and their number of following and the people that they're influencing grows, or their level of expertise grows, if there's that change happening that we see, underneath the surface, everything must be good. But we know that that's not the case. In fact, even just this week, my news feed, my podcast feed was filled with more and more stories added onto the heap of other stories we've encountered where you think that that's happening. There's flourishing and health taking place. But man, external change can fool us. And there can be stuff that's rotting underneath that surface. And so this morning, I want us to consider the difference between change and transformation, a change mindset versus a transformation mindset, and how that relates to moving into the good life that Jesus has called us to. An anchor verse that we've had throughout this series has come from Matthew 11. You're probably familiar with it by now, where Jesus talks about putting on his yoke or his teaching, his way of life. And that yoke is easy and light. But it's not easy and light in sort of the American dream paradigm of what easy and light means. After all, Jesus is someone who also calls us into self-denial and sacrificial love, and ultimately a paradigm of maturity that is giving our lives away on behalf of others. But it's easy and light in the sense that, as we've been talking about it, it fits us well. As we walk in that way, we're actually being formed into the kind of human beings that we've been created to be. And in that sense, There's an easiness and a lightness to it. It fits well for us. And that yoke is something that invites us into deep transformation, not quick or easy or superficial change. So before we get too much further, let me just pause and, at least in the way that I'm using these words this morning, change and transformation, offer a couple of definitions and help frame what I mean. So when I'm talking about change, I'm talking about modifications or tweaks that we make to our lives to get to a certain goal. Maybe that goal is a person that we want to become, something that we want to accomplish, and we make modifications and tweaks to our lives to get to that place. And they might be significant or noticeable or big modifications or tweaks. But this idea of change, this mindset of change, it comes from this imminent frame. And imminent frame, again, that's language we've used throughout this series. It's a term that Charles Taylor brings up in his book, A Secular Age, a really landmark book, wrestling with what's going on in our current secular culture. And within the imminent frame, we construct meaning and purpose from the material world. What we see and what we know in front of us is all that there is, and within that frame, we construct the good life, we construct meaning and purpose. And from that, this mindset of change, how can I make tweaks or modifications to my life to succeed or to impress or to accomplish within that frame or that mindset? And with change, no doubt there are moments of exhilaration in this mindset. Like as I was losing all of that weight, there were moments of exhilaration. I'm being noticed, I'm being affirmed, I'm being celebrated. I'm being centered more socially in my spheres. But there's a theme of exhaustion. Because this goal that I had to get to, I ultimately could never reach. And you'd think that once I got to a certain weight or looked a certain way, all of the insecurity would go away. It just got worse. It was this treadmill where there was no arrival place. There was always someone who was in better shape or looked better or was more successful than I was. And so I kept going with a more insatiable appetite to get to whatever goal that was inachievable. So moments of exhilaration, but a theme of exhaustion. Transformation, on the other hand, and in our context this morning, we're talking about transformation that comes in following the way of Jesus, the yoke of Jesus, taking his teaching seriously and orienting our lives around those. One way to define it is opening ourselves up to a process that fundamentally changes what it means to be human. Opening ourselves up to a process that fundamentally changes what it means to be human. And this idea of transformation in Jesus, it doesn't come from an imminent frame, it comes from a transcendent frame, where we begin to feel like, man, there's something more than just what's contained in this material world. The lid has popped off as we looked at last week, and we are opened up again to the divine and to the supernatural, that maybe there is a God out there who helps construct these concepts of who I am and what the good life is and how I'm orienting my life. The Apostle Paul, when he encountered the risen Jesus and he began to start churches all over the place and pastor churches, one of the churches that we know the most about in his relationship with was the church in Corinth, because he wrote a lot of letters back and forth between that church in Corinth. We have a couple of those in our New Testament. And in 2 Corinthians, this is what Paul says to this church that he planted and started and pastored. He said, "And we all, who with unveiled faces contemplate the Lord's glory, are being transformed into his image with ever-increasing glory, which comes from the Lord, who is the Spirit." And this word that he uses in the Greek, when we read transformed in our Bibles, the Greek word that Paul is using is metamorpho. And that word might sound familiar because the word metamorphosis ultimately comes from this Greek word. And in metamorphosis, as we know, there's this radical fundamental change that takes place over time. You know, think about the caterpillar that is transformed that is metamorphized, if that's even a word, that experiences metamorphosis and becomes a butterfly, or the tadpole that goes through a metamorphosis process and becomes a frog. There's this supernatural process that fundamentally changes the substance, the structure of what that is. And this is what we're talking about when we're talking about change. And so change, modifications and tweaks, transformation, this opening ourselves up to a process that fundamentally changes who we are. And so we're going to keep in 2 Corinthians this morning and digging deeper into some of the differences between this change and transformation mindset. And as we continue, I think this is the most central, the biggest one that I want to highlight this morning. You see, the change mindset is about pushing, and the transformation mindset is about pulling. And here's what I mean. A lot of the change that we feel the pressure to make in our lives to keep up, the energy behind that, at least as I reflect on my life and a lot of the people I'm in close relationship with, some of that energy at our back that's pushing us to change, it comes from two different things. It comes from fear and it comes from comparison. And there's an overlap for sure. Man, social media does not help this, because as we compare ourselves to people, even if you take social media more thoughtfully and you have an eye towards being authentic in the way you present yourself in social media, still you can perform authenticity on social media. You are still sifting through your life and presenting generally the good and the impressive and leaving behind the things that are broken or ugly or difficult in your life, generally speaking. And as we compare ourselves to things that are fake and aren't even real, it drives us to feel like we constantly need to be making modifications and tweaks and changes to our life to keep up and to impress, or certainly that fear of failure, which for me in my life has been a strong push factor in my life, feeling like if I don't keep up and continue to be impressive in the areas where I've been affirmed in my life, will people still love me? Will even the people who are closest to me still love me if I am no longer impressive or achieving in certain areas where I've experienced a lot of affirmation? And so it's a pushing, and it's all about speed. And this is the key, right? We don't just want to lose weight or get healthier. We want to lose 30 pounds in 30 days before the Florida beach vacation. And it's interesting, when you look at some of the research, just using sort of physical health and weight as an example, when you look at the research, depending on your source, 80 to 90% of people that lose weight dramatically through some sort of a fad diet or exercise program gain that weight back on. And that's what happens when speed and efficiency is the primary driver. I want to get to that end as quickly as I can. And so then the means in which we're trying to get to that end become minimized or less important. But that doesn't lead to sustainable, long-lasting change, at least in the case of the weight loss as an example, but I think it applies in so many different areas of our life. This is the way that Andrew Root puts it, who wrote The Church in a Secular Age, as he talks about this relentless speed of change. It says, modernity promises that if you can get to the speed of change, you'll find purpose and significance. But this purpose and significance won't deliver the goods of contentment, peace, or rest. Instead, they only open new horizons, inviting more change upon the change you've just met. I have felt that so strongly in my life at times. This may be good for corporations like Apple and Amazon, completing in markets and seeking new products, but it's much less so for persons seeking a good life. So change, a push, and it's all about speed. Transformation, on the other hand, transformation in Jesus, the yoke that he calls us into, the way that he calls us into transformation, it's helpful to think about it less as a push and more of a pull and an invitation into something. So let's get back to the verse that we just looked at earlier. We looked at Paul using the word metamorphosis, to talk about the transformation in Jesus. Well, in context, as we look at this, he says, and we all know with unveiled face, beholding the glory of the Lord, we are being transformed into the same image from one degree of glory to another. And I think this section here is so critical in beholding the glory of the Lord. You see, when we turn to Jesus and it's his glory, it's his beauty, it's his goodness, it's his grace that begins to captivate our heart, that pulls us in to a journey of transformation. And I love this language of one degree of glory to another, because the emphasis is less on speed here, and it's more on a long journey of faithful obedience to Jesus. The means matter in a journey towards Jesus and transformation. So as we are not pushed by fear or comparison, and some of us still have conceptions of God where it is more of a push or a transactional relationship with God of I want to get to an ends of salvation, however that's constructed, and so I do a transaction with God that happens in order to get to that place, or a fear-based God that is pushing us to constantly change in such a way where we never quite arrive or get there or feel at peace or at rest in our relationship with God. Instead, this draws us in. The goodness, beauty, grace of God. And that's so much, I think, our job as a church and my job as a pastor. It's less about, now don't hear me wrong, our behaviors and our actions matter, but it's less about prescribing a program for behavioral modification for people and that leading to transformation, and more about constantly reminding people of the goodness and the beauty and the grace of Jesus and how he gives us a window into what God is like in that way. Because you see, as we're pulled into something, as we see something that is good and beautiful, that's worth following, that begins to affect our desires and our loves, not just our behavior. Behavior flows from what we desire and what we love, doesn't it? So really, this process of transformation, discipleship to Jesus, it is about a reordering of loves, because whatever we love is what we become. I mean, just think about it for a second, and it's just so true. It makes so much sense. You love money, you will become greedy. You love power, you love control, you will become a megalomaniac, obsessed with getting more power and more control. But the more and more that we love Jesus, our desires are being shaped to love Jesus more and more as we're pulled in to his goodness and his beauty. That's what begins to really fundamentally transform who we are. And it's a completely different paradigm, because so much of discipleship in church can get stuck in the change mindset, the behavioral modification mindset, and we lose this desire, the forming of our desire and the reordering of our loves being the primary center that we are moving towards and calling ourselves to. So this push versus pull is a really big and important distinction. And I also want to talk about change mindset being more conformity and transformation mindset being more about courageous non-conformity. Human beings, we are herd creatures in so many different ways. The other week, I was watching an animal documentary with my son, Carter. He's 6. That's one of our favorite things to do together. And we were watching a documentary on the wildebeest migration. And the kind of iconic image that comes to your mind when you think about the wildebeest is when they cross those big rivers on their migration, right? And they're filled with crocodiles that are ready just for a feeding frenzy. And this documentary looked into like the thought process of the herd as to when and where they cross the river. And guess what? There's very little thought process involved. Actually, there can be tons of crocodiles in that area ready to attack and ready to have a buffet. What determines when they cross, and sometimes they hang around the river for days before they do, what determines when they cross is the moment more than one try to enter the water. The moment you get to 2, 3, 4 wildebeest that go in, there's just this herd energy where everyone else, thousands of wildebeest, just instinctively start to run and cross, even if danger is ahead and it's not a good time or a place to do so. But I think a lot of the change that we experience, this push or pressure to change, it does emerge from fads and the noise of crowds and the herd mindset that we have. If everyone is doing it, it must be something that I should do. And this happens in our spiritual lives. I want to connect this to our spiritual journeys. It happens all over the place. We assume that the larger the platform that someone has, or the more people that are doing something or reading something or following something, that the larger the number or the herd, that there's a direct correlation to the credibility of that person. Or in the context of our following Jesus conversation this morning, there's then a direct correlation to their Jesus-centeredness. And so I better go and be a part of that church, that ministry, that institution, and we rush in and get caught up in that without taking a second to pause and to think and assess and to hold that up in that direction and that movement to Jesus that we encounter in the Gospels, to a cruciform Jesus like we talked about last week, who's about giving our lives away to others. So we move from conformity, and so much of what we do in life, do we even slow down as Jesus followers to think about it? Like that house that we got that was more than enough 5 years ago is now somehow becomes in our mind just a starter home that's not good enough, that we just have to work our way out of to something bigger or better. Or that framework that we're handed for retirement, that is just about now this season of sitting back and fulfilling my personal desire and enjoying life, even as that's promoted or lived out within the church, just sort of not even thinking, going with that flow, that conformity mindset, without pausing and courageously thinking about where is Jesus leading me and leading us as a community. The other place where the Apostle Paul uses that word metamorpho, where we get metamorphosis, there's one other spot, and it's probably a really familiar passage. It's from Romans 12, verse 2, and this is in the Message paraphrase by Eugene Peterson. Don't become so well adjusted to your culture that you fit into it without even thinking. Instead, fix your attention on God. You'll be changed from the inside out. Transformation. Readily recognize what he wants from you and quickly respond to it. Unlike the culture around you, always dragging you down to its level of immaturity, God brings the best out of you, develops well-formed maturity in you. Other translations, that verse starts with, do not copy or do not be conformed to the patterns of this world. Now, what I'm not saying is that we have a superiority complex to everyone else in the world and to culture. There are good and beautiful things that we need to learn from culture and other people that come from different backgrounds and worldviews. This is not what I'm talking about. It's just to sort of hunker down in our superiority complex and just sort of self-righteously reject everything else. That's not the heart of this. But it's to say, man, we've got to slow down and we've got to think, and that's part of this journey of transformation, is away from conformity towards courageous non-conformity. That transformation happens by using our brains, thinking well about what leads to flourishing and having the courage to seek that out. And finally, and this doesn't come directly from some of Paul's letters like these other points do, but I want to bring it up this morning because I think it's really relevant to where we are right now in discipleship in the church. The change mindset often is empowered by an imported diet, and the transformation mindset, a local diet. So there's been at least in the last 10 years, I've noticed it a lot more, this push to eat local. Because the more that we eat local, the foods that we consume, chances are, more likely than not, there's less preservatives, there's less fake stuff in that food. And we know at least a little bit more its backstory, how that food came. And then overall, that's a healthier part of our diet. Sure, if we have stuff that isn't local and that's a part of our diet, not the end of the world, but like base of our diet, the more local it becomes, in general, the more healthier we will be. And I think the same thing applies when it comes to the spiritual nourishment in the food that we are taking in. You see, the change mindset, the imported diet, whether it's spiritually or otherwise, is to say, here's something I want to look different in my life. Maybe it's my marriage or my finances or my relationships. Let me Google who the gurus are, who the celebrities are that have all the books and have all the talks and the podcasts in this space. And that is where I get the bulk of my diet, but yet I don't actually know who these people are. I've never met them before. I call them my pastor or my mentor or my whatever, my fellow person on my journey, but I don't know them. They don't know who I am. Now, I'm not saying that isn't a part of our diet. Absolutely, it can be a part of the spiritual content that we engage. I do that every week, listen to or read really good stuff from thoughtful people that I don't live life with, who I don't know and they don't know me. So that can be a part of it. But again, when that is the bulk of it, I think we miss out on transformation. Because when Paul is talking about transformation, it's in the context of these small communities that viewed themselves as family. Here is Paul, who has planted and pastored and lived with this community. Even though he's left Corinth, he still visits. He's still writing letters to these communities in relationships with them. We would do well in our journeys of transformation to make sure that we are having a good local diet, where some of our nourishment and challenge and encouragement is coming from people that we live life with, who we know. Because when we don't do this and when it all comes from an imported diet, then when Bill Hybels has a moral failure, or Christianity Today has issues within their culture that are really problematic, or one that hit really close home to me, Bruxy Cavey and all of the moral failure that was happening in his life. You name it, fill in the blank. If that was where I got my primary diet for discipleship and transformation, my world is rocked more than it needs to be. And when I embed myself in a local community with people who know me and I know them, and we do this journey together, and that's where I get my primary nutrients on the journey, I think that leads to deeper transformation. So as I close my thoughts today, it would be a little ridiculous based on this content to simply just offer three easy practical steps to transformation. Here you go. Turn your brain off, do these 3 things, and you'll get to transformation in Jesus. As we've talked about, it doesn't really work that way. And so instead, what I want to pause and call us into is to humility. Because ultimately, that is what is required in a journey of transformation. I think in a change mindset, there can be some humility involved. I don't want to just speak in broad strokes, but I don't think it's required. Because sometimes in a change mindset, it sounds like, man, look at what I'm doing, or I hope people notice, or I hope people are impressed by this, even if it's good things that we're going after. I don't know that humility is required for some of the change that we're pursuing in our lives, but to fall on our knees before Jesus and realize that we need full transformation, Now that takes humility. That sounds like tweaks and modifications to my life. God, they no longer work. I'm beginning to deconstruct this idea that purpose and meaning can just be found in this immanent frame. I'm not so sure anymore. I can't do this on my own, and I need to fall on my knees before you, Jesus, and say, I need you to transform my life. That letter that Paul wrote to the church in Corinth, just several paragraphs later, Paul brings up just another beautiful image of transformation where he says, therefore, if anyone is in Christ, the new creation has come. The old has gone, the new is here. New creation, that's what transformation is about, is moving into new creation. And I love how Judith Deal, I believe is her name, Judith Deal, a New Testament scholar, in her commentary on 2 Corinthians, she talks about when she's thinking about this concept of new creation, that kind of transformation, being transformed into a new creation in Christ, it is not just adding another additional ingredient onto an already pretty put together recipe. Instead, it's in many ways starting from scratch with all new ingredients. It's not like adding some, okay, I've pretty much got my life together, but I really do kind of want to sprinkle in a little Jesus. And so adding the chocolate chips on the ice cream or some other new ingredient to a well-formed chili recipe that you've got down, that's less of what this is like. And it's more, again, in humility, working with all new ingredients. We are fundamentally created in the image of God. There's goodness in us, right? We start our theology in Genesis 1 and not Genesis 3. There's goodness in us, but man, sin and brokenness is in the world. And it so often has its way in my life and in our communities. And in humility, we see and we recognize that, and we fall on our knees desperate to be transformed. To, in a very fundamental sense, become new people. Think about what it means to be human in a totally different way, where it's about giving our lives away for others. That's where that journey ultimately leads. And so what better way to wrestle with this call to humility and our desperate need for Jesus than by taking communion together. And before we go to our different venues for communion, would you please join me in prayer? God, there are times in our life where we just realize that the status quo or the treadmill, relentless treadmill of change to keep up just doesn't work anymore. And it leads us feeling exhausted, questioning if there is more to life than just what's right here. And it opens ourselves back up to you, Jesus. And God, we need you through the power of the Spirit to transform our lives. We just declare that this morning. We need transformation. We know that happens. That's a supernatural process that we can't do on our own. We participate in that. There is effort involved. We are called to participate in that with you, but we need you to become the kind of people that we were designed to be. Thank you for your goodness and your grace. Amen. So if you are someone this morning who is going to help distribute the communion elements, you are welcome to come on forward. You can grab the elements and begin to get those out around the sanctuary this morning. And how this will work is as they are passed, we like to serve one another as we do communion. This image of we need one another in this, and we are being served by one another as we come back to the communion table. So as you're handed whatever you call these things, as you're handed these trays, there's both the juice and the bread in them. Hand them to the person next to you, and while they hold it, then you can take. So they hold it for you while you take, just as an image of being served by that brother or sister in Christ who is sitting next to you. And this is a place we go, the communion table, to cultivate that humility, right? This is a falling back on this idea that we are in desperate need of Jesus in our life. And there's a trust that, man, resurrection life, new creation, resurrection life, it actually comes through the cross. It doesn't come through our fame and our glory and our impressiveness by the world's standards. It actually comes through cruciform postures of self-giving love and sacrifice and offering our lives to another. As we trust that and embrace that more, that's where the resurrection life and the transformation comes from. So as they continue to be distributed, I'll pause for a moment. You can sit and reflect for a second, and then I will walk us through taking communion together. Reading from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 26. Jesus is gathered around for the Last Supper. He's called his closest community, his inner circle, his disciples, to share that final meal as he looks to the cross. And as they were eating, Jesus took some bread and blessed it. Then he broke it in pieces and gave it to the disciples, saying, "Take this and eat, for this is my body." Let's take and eat together. And he took the cup of wine and gave thanks to God for it. He gave it to them and said, Each of you drink from it, for this is my blood, which confirms the covenant between God and his people. It is poured out as a sacrifice to forgive the sins of many. Let's take and drink together. Jesus, thank you for the cross and the resurrection life that it brings to our world and to our lives. Amen.
Let's all stand together as we close out our time.
It was my cross you bore, so I could live in the freedom you died for. And now my life is yours, and I will sing of your goodness forevermore. Worthy is your name, Jesus. You deserve the praise. Worthy is your name. Worthy is your name, Jesus. You deserve the praise. Worthy is your name. And now my shame is gone. I stand amazed in your love undeniable. Your grace goes on, and I will sing of your goodness forevermore. Worthy is your name, Jesus. You deserve the praise. Worthy is your name. Worthy is your name, Jesus. You deserve the praise. Worthy is your name. Worthy is your name, Jesus. You deserve the praise. Worthy is your name. Worthy is your name, Jesus. You deserve the praise. Worthy is your name. Be exalted now in the heavens as your glory fills this place. You alone deserve our praise. You're the name above all names. Be exalted now in the heavens as your glory fills this place. You alone deserve our praise. You're the name above all names. Be exalted now in the heavens as your glory fills this place. You alone deserve our praise. You're the name above all names. Be exalted now in the heavens as your glory fills this place. You alone deserve our
was a joy to gather with you here this morning. Hope to see you back next week. We'll be wrapping up our sermon series, The Good Life, next Sunday. And may you go opening yourself up to the transformation that Jesus wants to do in your life. Have a great rest of your day.